The wind howled through the forest like a hungry beast, shaking the wooden walls of the lonely cabin. Inside, a man named Jack sat near a dying fire, staring at the flickering flames. He had chosen this isolated life after losing everything in the busy human world. His job, his friends, even his will to keep pretending he was happy. The forest was quiet, cold, and empty, until that night. At first he thought it was just the wind. A soft scratching sound came from outside the cabin door, almost lost between the howls of the storm. Jack froze. No one came here. There were no neighbors for miles, no hikers in this frozen season. He listened. The scratching came again, weak and uneven, like something dragging across the wooden porch. Jack slowly stood up. His heart beat faster with every step as he walked to the door. He grabbed the old hunting knife from the shelf and held it tight in his trembling hand. What if it was a bear? Or a wolf? Or worse, someone desperate enough to kill for food? With a sharp breath, he unlocked the door and pulled it open. Snow rushed in, cold and wild. And lying on the porch was not a bear, not a wolf, not even a human. She was small, thin, and curled into herself like a dying bird. Her skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight, pale blue with soft glowing lines running across her arms and face. Her hair was tangled in silver like spider silk. Her lips were cracked. Her eyes were half closed, dull with hunger. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. Jack's mouth went dry. An alien, a real living alien. His mind screamed to shut the door and pretend he never saw her. But then her body shivered, weak and slow, and he saw the frost on her eyelashes. She was dying. Without thinking, Jack dropped the knife and rushed forward. He knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he touched her cold shoulder. She flinched, letting out a soft, broken hiss like a wounded animal. He whispered, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." Of course she didn't understand his words, but his voice was gentle, and something in her eyes flickered. Fear mixed with hope. Jack carefully lifted her in his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like carrying a bundle of sticks. He carried her inside and kicked the door shut against the wind. The cabin was small, just one room with a stone fireplace, an old table, and a single bed. He laid her on the rug near the fire and wrapped his thick blanket around her trembling body. She stared at him with wide, glassy eyes, ready to run even though she had no strength left to crawl. He kept his distance and moved slowly, showing his empty hands. Jack went to the cupboard and grabbed the only thing he had left from last week's supply run, canned soup and some dried bread. He opened the can, poured it into a pot, and set it over the fire. The smell of warm broth filled the cabin. The alien's nose twitched. She licked her dry lips but kept staring at him like he was a threat. When the soup was ready, Jack placed the bowl near her and stepped back. She didn't move. He took a spoonful and sipped it himself to show it wasn't poison. Then he gently offered her the spoon. For a long moment she stared at it. Then, with shaking hands, she took the spoon and brought it to her mouth. The first taste made her eyes close. A soft sound escaped her throat, a sigh of pure relief. She ate slowly, carefully, like someone afraid the food might disappear. Jack watched her in silence, his heart tightening. She was real. She was suffering. And she was alone. After the soup, she curled under the blanket and fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. Her glowing lines dimmed until they were almost invisible. Jack sat near the fire, staring at her fragile form. Questions crashed inside his mind. Where did she come from? Why was she here? Was she dangerous? Would others come looking for her? But as the fire burned low and the wind howled outside, none of those questions mattered. What mattered was that someone had come to his door dying, and he had saved her. He gently placed another log on the fire, keeping the room warm. Then he looked at her again. Her chest rose and fell in slow breaths. For the first time in years, Jack didn't feel completely alone. Something about her presence filled the hollow silence in the cabin. It scared him. It comforted him. It made him feel alive again. Outside, the forest groaned under the weight of the storm. Inside, two lost souls slept, one human, one alien, sharing the same fragile spark of life. The storm lasted for 2 more days. Snow buried the world outside the cabin, turning everything white and silent. Jack stayed inside with the alien woman who still had no name. She slept most of the time, curled like a fragile animal near the fireplace. Every now and then her glowing skin would flicker softly, pale blue when she was calm, dim gray when she was afraid. Jack tried not to scare her. He moved slowly, spoke softly, and kept a safe distance. Still, her eyes followed him everywhere. Even when pretending to sleep, he felt her gaze watching from under the blanket. Communication was hard. She didn't speak his language, and he didn't know hers. But Jack was stubborn. He wanted her to understand she was safe here. One morning, he took out an old notebook and a pencil. He drew a simple picture of himself with a smile, holding out food. Then he drew her, small and thin, eating. He pushed the notebook gently toward her. She blinked at the page, then at him. Slowly, with shaky fingers, she tapped the picture of herself and let out a soft sound, like a whisper mixed with a hum. It wasn't a word he knew, but it felt important. She pointed at herself again, repeating the sound. Jack guessed it might be her name. Or maybe just her way of saying me. He smiled and pointed at himself. "Jack," she watched him silent. Then after a long pause, she pointed at him and made a quiet sound, broken and unsure. "Ja." Jack's heart jumped. She was trying. From that moment, something changed. The air felt warmer, even though the wind outside still screamed like a beast. In the days that followed, they developed a quiet rhythm. Jack chopped wood and melted snow for water. She stayed wrapped in blankets, watching him like a wary cat. Whenever he left the cabin to gather firewood, she crawled closer to the door, as if afraid he might never return. One evening, Jack returned with a bundle of logs and found her sitting by the window, her fingers pressed against the glass. She was staring at the falling snow with wide, glowing eyes. The blue light along her arms danced softly, like small rivers of light under her skin. She looked peaceful. When she saw him, she quickly pulled the blanket around herself again, but Jack only smiled. He placed the wood near the fire and took out a piece of dried bread from the cupboard. He offered it to her with an open palm. She hesitated, then reached out. Their fingers brushed. Her skin was warm now, not icy like before. Her eyes flickered a brighter blue for a second, and she quickly turned her face away. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat awake, thinking. She was stronger now, eating more each day, but she still flinched at sudden sounds. She didn't trust him fully yet, and he didn't know if he should trust her. She was from another world. What if someone was searching for her? What if they came here and found her with him? But when he looked at her sleeping near the fire, the fear in his chest faded. She looked small, alone, lost, just like he once was. By the fourth day, she started copying his actions. When he stacked firewood, she placed small sticks beside it. When he swept the floor with a broom, she tried too, awkward and clumsy but determined. Jack laughed softly the first time she almost knocked over a chair. She froze at the sound, then tilted her head and let out a small sound that might have been a laugh too. It was quick, unsure, but real. She was learning, and so was he. One night the fire burned low and the cold crept inside again. Jack pulled his coat tighter and saw her shivering under the blanket. He stood and walked to the shelf where an old wool jacket hung. It was far too big for her, but he brought it anyway and offered it gently. She stared at it, then at him. After a long moment, she reached out and touched the fabric. Her glowing lines pulsed a faint golden color he had never seen before. She pulled the jacket over her shoulders and curled inside it. "Warm," Jack whispered, pointing at the jacket. She looked at him, her bright eyes soft in the firelight. Then very slowly she whispered back, "Warm." Jack froze. It was her first clear human word. Something deep inside his chest ached, but it wasn't sadness this time. It was hope. Outside, the wind howled through the trees again. Inside the small cabin, two lonely lives sat by the fire, no longer strangers. The storm finally passed, leaving behind a silent world of white. Snow covered the forest like a thick blanket. The air was sharp and clean, and the cabin seemed even smaller against the endless emptiness outside. Jack stood by the window, staring at the frozen trees. The alien woman, who still had no real name, was sitting near the fireplace, wrapped in his oversized jacket, tracing circles in the air with her glowing fingers. She seemed calmer now, but her eyes often drifted to the window, scanning the sky like she was expecting something, or fearing it. Jack knew she was healing, but she was also hiding something. Something deep. Something heavy. That afternoon, he decided to gather more firewood. The food was running low, and he wanted to check the area for any animal tracks or fallen branches. Before leaving, he looked at her and pointed to himself. "Jack, go, back soon. She tilted her head, confused. He repeated the word slowly, then mimed walking and returning. After a long pause, she nodded once and curled back into the blanket. Outside, the snow crunched under his boots. The forest was silent except for the sound of his breath. He walked farther than usual, hoping to find dry wood under thick trees. That's when something strange caught his eye. A faint metallic glimmer buried under a mound of snow near the frozen creek. Jack stopped. He brushed the snow away with his gloves. Underneath was a broken piece of metal, shaped like a curved wing, scorched and twisted like it had been through fire. Strange symbols were carved along its edge, glowing faint blue even in the daylight. His heart pounded. It didn't look like anything from Earth. This was from her. Jack lifted it carefully. It was cold but seemed to hum softly in his hands like it was alive. He wrapped it in his coat and carried it back to the cabin as fast as he could. When he entered, the alien woman jumped. Her glowing lines flared bright white for an instant. Jack gently placed the strange shard on the floor between them. Her eyes widened. The color in her skin flickered violently between gray and blue. She shook her head quickly, whispering a sharp sound like no, no, no. Jack raised his hands to calm her. It's okay. I found it. Outside. Snow. She backed against the wall, hugging the blanket to her chest. Her breathing came fast and shallow. For a moment, Jack thought she might attack or run. Then slowly her glow faded to a dim, broken blue. She slid to the floor and covered her face with trembling hands. Jack knelt, keeping a safe distance. What is it? He asked softly, knowing she couldn't understand his words. But she lifted her head anyway. Her eyes shimmered with tears. She pointed to the shard, then to the sky, then to herself. Her voice cracked as she spoke broken words in his language. They. Gone. Left. Jack froze. She had just spoken more words than ever before. They left you? He whispered. She nodded once, then whispered again. Broken. The word hit him like a stone. She thought she was broken. That was why they abandoned her. Jack's hands curled into fists. He imagined her people, cold and heartless, leaving her here to die because she wasn't perfect. Because she was different, he knew that feeling. Being thrown away. Forgotten. Left behind. Jack gently pushed the shard away from her and covered it with a cloth. Not broken, he said firmly, pointing at her. Safe. She stared at him with wide, glimmering eyes. Her glow softened, turning pale gold for just a moment. That night, neither of them spoke. She sat close to the fire, staring at the glowing lines on her arms as if seeing them for the first time. Jack sat nearby, silently carving a piece of wood with his pocket knife, though his mind was far away. He kept glancing at the covered shard. It seemed to hum faintly like a heartbeat, a piece of the stars lying on his cabin floor. He realized something important. If he found that shard, others might find it too. And if they were searching for her, they might return. Jack looked at the woman. She had fallen asleep, the firelight painting her face in soft gold. She was no longer trembling, no longer starving, and for the first time he made a silent promise to himself. He would not let them take her. Not now. Not ever. The days passed slowly after Jack found the shard. He kept it hidden under the floorboards away from her sight. The alien woman, who still had no real name, was stronger now. She could stand, walk around the cabin, and even help with small tasks. Sometimes she hummed soft, strange songs while folding blankets or fixing broken things with her glowing hands. But every night, Jack noticed the same thing. She would stare at the window, eyes searching the dark sky. It was like she was listening for something he could not hear. And then one night, something answered. The snow had stopped days ago, leaving the forest calm and still. Jack sat at the table carving a wooden spoon while she curled by the fireplace, quietly tracing glowing patterns on the floorboards. The fire popped softly. The air was warm. Then the cabin walls trembled. It was faint at first, just a low hum like distant thunder. Jack froze. The hum grew louder. Glass rattled in the windows. A sudden blue flash lit the forest outside. She shot to her feet, eyes wide, glowing lines on her skin flaring white-hot with fear. Jack rushed to the window. Above the trees, strange lights moved silently, blue and silver orbs spinning in the cold night air. They hovered low, scanning the ground. The hum became a sharp buzzing sound like a swarm of giant insects. They're here, Jack whispered, though she couldn't understand the words. But she understood the fear in his voice. She bolted toward the door, panic twisting her face. Jack caught her arm gently but firmly. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Too cold. Too dangerous." She yanked her arm free and hissed a desperate, broken sound. She wanted to run. To disappear, Jack thought fast. If they saw her out there, they would take her. He couldn't let that happen. He pointed toward the trapdoor in the floor. His old root cellar. It was small, dark, and cold, but hidden. He ran to it, lifted the wooden door, and lit a lantern inside. Then he looked at her and pointed down. "Safe." She shook her head violently, trembling. The glow on her skin flickered between white and gray. Jack grabbed his thick coat from the wall and pressed it into her hands. "Please," he said softly. "Safe." Her eyes met his. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then finally, she nodded. She crawled down into the cellar. Jack lowered the door and pulled the rug back over it, hiding every trace. The hum outside was deafening now. Light swept across the windows. Jack stood alone in the center of the cabin, heart pounding like a drum. A sharp knock hit the door. Jack jumped. The knock came again, slow, heavy, unnatural. He forced his hands to stop shaking and walked to the door. He opened it only a crack. Two tall figures stood outside, glowing faint blue under the moonlight. Their bodies were covered in sleek armor-like suits. Their faces were hidden behind smooth glass masks that reflected the firelight from inside the cabin. One of them spoke, voice echoing like metal underwater. The words were not human, but Jack didn't need to understand. The tone was clear, command. They were asking about her. Jack shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "No one here." The figure tilted its head, scanning him silently. Then a small drone floated from its shoulder and buzzed around the porch, flashing light across the snow. Jack's hands curled into fists at his sides. If the drone sensed her heat below the floor, but after a long, tense pause, the drone returned to the figure's shoulder. The tall beings exchanged a glance, then slowly turned and walked back into the forest. Their blue lights faded into the dark. The humming sound vanished. They were gone. Jack closed the door and locked it. He stood still for a long time, breathing hard, waiting to hear their return. The forest was silent again. When he was sure they were truly gone, he rushed to the cellar and pulled the door open. She was crouched in the dark, hugging his coat to her chest. Her eyes glowed faint silver in the lantern light, wide and wet. The moment she saw him, she climbed out and stumbled into his arms. Her whole body was shaking. "It's okay," Jack whispered, holding her tightly. "They're gone." For the first time, she spoke clear words, broken but strong. "You, safe." Then she buried her face against him, trembling like a child. Jack held her close, staring at the dark forest beyond the window. The danger wasn't over. They might come back, but tonight she had chosen to trust him, and he had chosen to protect her. The world outside was quiet again, but inside the cabin something had changed. After the night her people came, the alien woman stayed close to Jack. She no longer watched the window every hour. She no longer flinched at every sound. Instead, she followed him, silent as a shadow but always near. Jack didn't push her away. He understood. Fear takes time to leave. He had lived with fear once too, like a ghost always behind his shoulder. So he let her follow, and slowly, life began to feel different. One morning, sunlight spilled across the wooden floor, soft and golden. Jack opened the door to the crisp forest air. The snow was melting, revealing patches of dark earth and green moss. He took his axe and pointed to the firewood pile. "Help," he said, then mimed chopping. She tilted her head. Her glowing lines pulsed faint blue as she watched him swing the axe. After the third strike, she walked forward, picked up a small branch, and placed it on the block. Jack smiled. "Okay, try." She copied his stance, awkward but determined. When she swung, the axe hit the edge and sent the branch flying. She stumbled back and let out a soft, frustrated hiss. Jack chuckled and gently showed her how to grip the handle tighter. On her second try, the branch split. Her eyes widened. The lines on her arms flashed bright gold for a heartbeat. "Good," Jack said, clapping once. Her lips curled in the faintest, shyest smile. Later that day, Jack boiled water on the fire. He showed her how to stir soup, how to clean dishes with hot water, how to stack logs neatly by size. She listened to every word, even if she didn't understand the language. She copied his movements with careful attention. Like every small thing was a puzzle worth solving, she also had secrets of her own. When the firewood was low, She touched two small stones together and made a spark of blue flame without flint or matches. When Jack's old kettle cracked, she ran her glowing fingers along the metal and sealed it as if it had never been broken. Jack watched these moments in quiet awe. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was helping. In the evenings, they sat by the fire together. Jack carved small wooden figures, a bird, a fox, a star. She watched, fascinated, then began shaping patterns from leftover scraps of metal. Her glowing lines shifted colors as she worked, soft blues when calm, pale gold when happy. One night she finished a small shape and handed it to him. It was a simple heart, bent from metal wire, glowing faintly where her fingers had touched it. Jack held it in his palm for a long time. His chest felt strange, heavy and light at the same time. "Thank you," he whispered. She tilted her head and repeated softly, "Thank you." Her voice was shaky but clear. As the days passed, the cabin no longer felt cold or lonely. It felt alive. Jack caught himself humming while cooking. He caught her humming too, soft alien notes that blended with the crackling fire. Sometimes she even laughed, quiet, short bursts when he dropped something or made a funny face. Every time, Jack pretended not to notice just to make her laugh again. But even in these gentle days, a shadow lingered in Jack's mind. Her people might return. He often stepped outside alone at night, scanning the dark sky for lights. Nothing yet, but he knew how quickly everything could change, so while she slept, he began a quiet project. Far from the cabin, hidden behind thick pines, he started building a small shelter, just a frame for now made from logs and stones. A secret place, somewhere safe for her if danger came again. One evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, she stood at the doorway watching him return from the forest. She wore his old jacket, the sleeves far too long, and her glowing lines shimmered warm gold in the fading light. Jack realized she no longer looked like a lost stranger. She looked at home. Inside, she stirred the soup while he stacked the last of the wood. She looked up at him with clear, bright eyes and said carefully, "Home." Jack froze. His heart tightened. Then he smiled. "Yes," he whispered. "Home." The word echoed softly between them, wrapping around the cabin like a promise. Spring was waking the forest. The snow had melted into silver streams that whispered through the moss. Tiny green buds pushed through the dark soil outside the cabin. Life was returning, and yet Jack could not rest. Every night he dreamed of blue lights in the sky. Every dawn he walked to the hidden shelter deep in the woods, checking the roof, strengthening the walls. It was small, just enough for two people, hidden under the trees where no light could reach. He built it for her, in case they came back. One bright morning, Jack was splitting wood outside when he heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned and froze. She was standing there, holding one of his tools in her hands. Not the axe, the small metal spade he used to dig the ground. Her glowing lines shimmered pale gold in the sunlight. "Work," she said quietly, pointing to the earth. Jack blinked, then smiled. Yes, work. Together they dug small patches of soil near the cabin. Jack showed her how to place seeds in neat rows. She watched closely, copying each motion with gentle care. When she pressed her glowing fingers to the soil, the ground seemed to warm and the seeds trembled like they could already feel life. Jack watched in silent awe. He had built the cabin to escape life. Now she was filling it with it. But later that evening, she disappeared. Jack panicked when he didn't see her by the fire. He ran outside, scanning the trees, heart racing. The air was cool and quiet. Then he saw her, standing by the stream, staring at something hidden under a tarp near the trees. The shelter. His secret. She turned as he approached. Her face showed no fear, no anger, just quiet understanding. "You build," she said softly. Her voice was steady now, stronger than before. Jack nodded, unable to speak. He felt caught like a child with a broken secret. "Safe," he said finally, pointing to the shelter. "For you." Her glowing lines dimmed to gray. She looked at the forest, then back at him. "Run?" Jack lowered his head. "If they come," silence wrapped around them. A bird called somewhere far away. Then she stepped closer, her eyes bright with a deep light. "No run." Jack lifted his head slowly. She placed her small glowing hand against his chest. "Stay." The word hit him harder than any storm ever could. That night they sat by the fire in silence. She was wrapped in his jacket, staring at the flames. Jack watched her from the corner of his eye. She was no longer the starving stranger who had collapsed on his porch. She was strong. She spoke. She smiled sometimes. She was part of his days, his nights, his world, and he realized something terrifying. If they came again, they would take her away. The next evening, the sky answered his fear. A low rumble rolled across the forest. Jack stepped outside. The air smelled electric, like a coming storm, but the sky was clear. Then he saw them, silver shapes cutting across the clouds, glowing with cold light. Her people, coming back. He ran inside. She was already standing by the window, her glowing lines flashing white with panic. The cabin trembled as a shadow passed over the trees. Jack grabbed his coat and pointed to the forest. "We go, hide!" She didn't move. "Please," he begged. "We have to go." She turned slowly, her eyes glowing brighter than he had ever seen. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "No." Jack froze. "They will take you." She stepped closer, her hand gripping his shirt. "I choose." The world seemed to stop. Even the hum of the ship faded behind the sound of his heartbeat. "You choose," he whispered. She nodded. "Stay. With you." Outside, the massive ship lowered through the clouds, silver and silent. A voice echoed through the air, strange and sharp, calling to her. The cabin windows rattled. She walked to the door. Jack followed, trembling. They stood side by side in the doorway, the wind whipping her silver hair across her glowing face. The voice called again. The ship hovered, waiting. She looked at Jack one last time. Her eyes were calm, golden. Her lips curved in the smallest, truest smile. Then she turned her back on the ship and walked inside the cabin. The silver ship hovered above the forest, silent like a frozen moon. Jack stood in the doorway, hardly breathing. The alien woman stood beside him, her glowing lines calm and golden, her silver hair dancing in the wind. The voice from the ship echoed again, strange, cold words calling her home. She didn't move. She didn't answer. She just looked at Jack. Then slowly she stepped forward. For one terrifying second, Jack thought she was leaving, but instead she bent down, picked up the glowing shard he had once found in the snow, and let it fall from her fingers. It sank into the soft mud with a hiss, its blue light fading to nothing. The voice stopped. The ship hovered for a moment longer, silent and confused. Then it rose back into the clouds and vanished without a sound. The forest was quiet again. Jack let out the breath he had been holding. His hands were shaking. His heart felt like it was breaking and healing at the same time. She turned to him, her glowing lines fading to a warm golden shimmer. "Stay," she whispered. Jack could not speak. He only nodded, and that was how everything changed. The days after that were brighter than any Jack had known. Spring wrapped the cabin in soft green, and the icy river turned into a rushing silver ribbon. Birds sang again. The forest smelled of wet soil and new life. They worked together every day. He showed her how to plant seeds in rows, how to build small wooden fences to keep rabbits away. She showed him how to make the soil warm with her glowing hands, how to twist metal scraps into perfect gardening tools. Their small garden grew fast, green sprouts pushing through black earth like tiny miracles. She hummed as she worked, soft alien notes mixing with the buzz of bees. Jack found himself humming too, matching her strange melody. Sometimes, when he looked at her bending among the plants, the sunlight painting gold in her silver hair, he had to blink away the ache in his chest. She was no longer a guest. She was home. Inside the cabin, everything changed too. She fixed broken things Jack had given up on, cracks in the stone hearth, loose hinges, even the squeaky floorboards. She decorated the walls with tiny glowing patterns she traced with her fingers at night. Jack carved a second chair for her, then a small bed beside the fire. She refused the bed at first, but later he woke in the night and saw her curled in it, glowing softly like a lantern. There was laughter now. Real, warm laughter. Sometimes hers, sometimes his, sometimes both. The silence that had once filled the cabin was gone, and Jack didn't miss it. One golden evening after a long day of planting, they sat on the porch together. The air smelled of pine and flowers. The sun bled orange across the trees. She sat wrapped in his jacket, her glowing lines faint and soft like candlelight. Jack handed her a small wooden carving, a fox. She held it carefully like it was made of glass. Her lips curved in a slow, honest smile. "Gift," Jack said softly. She looked at him. "Gift," she repeated, voice clear. Then she reached into her pocket and took out something small. It was a seed glowing faint silver. She placed it gently in his hand. "Grow," she said. Jack stared at the seed, then at her. His throat tightened. "Together," he whispered. She nodded. Together, weeks passed. The garden bloomed. Blue flowers with silver edges, alien plants from her seeds, grew beside green human tomatoes and yellow wild daisies. The air buzzed with life. Jack often stood at the edge of the garden just watching her. She moved with quiet joy, barefoot in the warm soil, her glowing lines bright with happiness. She laughed when birds landed near her feet. Sometimes he remembered the night she collapsed on his porch, starving and trembling, and he wondered how he had ever lived without her. One evening, as the stars rose, they stood side by side outside the cabin. She pointed to the sky where the faint lights of distant worlds sparkled. Her eyes glimmered golden. "Home?" she asked softly. Jack looked at her. "Here," he said. She smiled. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and spring. The cabin behind them glowed warm with firelight. The garden rustled softly in the dark. They stood there together, human and alien, once strangers, now something more, watching the stars not as something distant, but as a promise of everything they had yet to build.